Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn, and today we're talking about frauds and scams, including a common door-to-door fraud targeting seniors in what's known as an HVAC scam. What do you do if someone knocks at your door and uses high-pressure tactics to sell you something they tell you you need? Victims of these frauds say yes, then find themselves locked into multi-year home equipment contracts that they don't need, and then subject to illegal liens against their homes. How common are these door-to-door scams, and what should you watch out for? And beyond door-to-door scams, what other scams should people be on the lookout for, online, over the phone, or by text message? Here today to talk about the topic of door-to-door scams is lawyer Dennis Crawford, and we will then be joined by our panel of financial and law enforcement experts to talk about other common scams. Dennis, thanks so much for joining me today. Can you walk me through what one of these HVAC scams looks like?
Hi, Christine, and thanks so much for having me on the show. It's a real thrill to be here to talk about this widespread HVAC rental scam that's been going all across the country. It works like this. And they tell you that they're doing free inspections of your equipment, like, say, your air conditioner or your furnace. So you let them into your house and they look at your equipment and they tell you, lo and behold, it's defective. You're going to need a new one. But don't worry, they can rent you one for a low monthly fee. And so you say, great, you can uninstall my defective equipment and put in your equipment. They do this. You pay the monthly rental fee and you go on with your life. You don't think anything more of it. The problem comes when down the road you decide to sell your house. You get a call from your real estate lawyer that says, we have a problem. There's a lien on your house from this company that installed the air conditioner. You can't sell your house unless you get rid of this lien. And this company is demanding $12,000, $15,000, or even $18,000 or more in one case I saw to delete this lien off your house.
So how is it that these companies are able to get liens registered against these homes? And is that legal for them to issue this lien?
So the truth is, it's a loophole in the law, and it exists in Ontario and in most provinces. There's this loophole which allows companies to register what is called a notice of security interest. And that's a legal term, but what it is basically a legal instrument that's registered on title to your house. And it prevents you from being able to sell your house unless you pay it out. The reason they're able to do this is, like I say, it is basically a loophole which is being exploited. It was originally designed for manufacturing facilities or commercial properties. So if there is rented equipment in a building, anyone who's buying that building knows that the rented equipment comes with it. But it was never designed for residential properties, for regular homeowners like you and I. And that's how that loophole is being exploited.
So how are people able to get the lien off of their home if it's something like $15,000? Is the only way to get it off to pay that huge sum of money, or is there something else people can do?
Yeah, great question. And that's why I started Ontario hvacscam.com, because it is traditionally, you can fight these in court, and the courts have ruled in favor of homeowners. But traditionally, that's been very expensive. So we started Ontario hvacscam.com to make it a little more affordable for homeowners to take these companies on in court and get these illegal liens deleted so that they don't have to pay that $15,000 payout a few days before they're closing the sale of their property.
And does it matter if someone's not selling their property? Does it matter that there is this lien registered?
It could, yes, because it can also prevent you from being able to refinance your property if you want to take out a second mortgage to do some remodeling, or buy a cottage, or pay for education. You typically can't do that while you have one of these HVAC liens on your house.
And we've got about 20 seconds. How does someone find out if there's a lien registered?
Well, if they live in Ontario, they should go to ontariohvacscam.com and we will send them a complimentary title check of their house and let them know if there are any liens. But wherever you live, you should call your lawyer before you sign a deal to sell your house.
We're going to get back into this after this commercial break. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing frauds and scams, including a door-to-door HVAC scam with lawyer Dennis Crawford. Now, Dennis, what are some of the tactics that these door-to-door scam artists are using to get victims to sign up for this?
Well, I'll tell you, Christine, we've seen every tactic in the book. These door-to-door salesmen are really persuasive, and they've perfected this sales pitch. So one thing they'll tell you, for example, they might tell you that your equipment is defective, or they'll go one step further and say your equipment is being phased out by the government, so you have to replace it. Or they often tell homeowners that they're installing new high efficiency equipment. So it will be so efficient that you'll save more money on your utility bill than you will pay to rent the equipment, which of course is untrue, because no high efficiency furnace is going to save you more than a few dollars. But these are some of the tactics they use. One thing they don't tell the homeowner is that after that equipment is installed, they're going to secretly register a lien against their house.
So what about the victims in these cases? Who are the victims, and what has happened to them? What have you been able to achieve for them?
Yeah. Well, the victims are everyday Canadian homeowners. A lot of the times they're seniors, but not always. Any one of us could fall for one of these well-rehearsed sales pitches. And so it's just, like I say, homeowners who think they're doing a good thing. They think they're helping the environment by renting high efficiency equipment. And then they only find out about it when they go to sell or refinance their house and they discover the lien. So I've been working in this area of the law here in Ontario for a while, and I'm really happy to say that we've been able to have some great results for clients. In many cases, we've been able to get these liens deleted. And in some other cases, we've also been able to get some of their money back for those exorbitant rental fees as well.
So a typical rental fee would be something like what for this?
These companies normally charge between $50 and $70 a month for the rental fee, which doesn't sound like a lot until you realize that these contracts are usually for a 10 or 15-year term. And when we're talking about equipment like hot water heaters or HEPA filters or air conditioners, which you can get at Home Depot for $1,500 to $2,500, well, $70 over every month for 15 years is like 5 or 7 or 10 times the actual cost of the equipment.
So are there any consequences for the companies that are running these scams? What are these companies all about? Like, do they acknowledge that this is kind of potentially scam behavior?
These companies, it's been really hard for the authorities to do any enforcement, because these companies operate right in that gray zone between civil law and criminal law. So it's really hard for the police or the Crown attorneys to bring any enforcement proceedings against them. And the other thing they do is they hide behind shell companies. So if authorities start investigating one of their companies, they just shut that company down and open up a new company under a similar name.
So, I've actually had people come to my door with a sales pitch along these lines. I'm sure many of our viewers also have. And it's hard to know that it's a scam. So what would you advise our viewers to do to help them tell the difference between a legitimate business, because there's some legitimate businesses that do HVAC rentals, and a scam business?
Yeah. Well, the truth is this scam has been so widespread that most of the legitimate companies in this space have discontinued doing door-to-door marketing, especially during the time of COVID. So the chances are, if someone is at your door today, it probably isn't from a reputable company like your local utility company. And so I would just tell people to err on the side of caution. And it's too bad we have to give this advice, but it's always good advice not to open your door to a visitor who you're not expecting.
So we've got about 30 seconds. What resources can you direct people to find out more about this?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I would commend our website, ontariohvacscam.com. And there's also some really good information out there in the mainstream media. W5 covered this scam a few years ago when they did a program. And just do your own research and be aware of this scam.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me today, Dennis, and telling us about this work you're doing. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're talking about frauds and scams. And we're joined again by lawyer Dennis Crawford and also by Elizabeth Nomofsky, Vice President of Marketing at Caldwell Securities, and by John Meacher, a retired RCMP officer and lead investigator specializing in financial crimes. Thank you all for joining me today. Elizabeth, how would you compare door-to-door scams to other types of scams that we see in terms of how common they are?
No, that's a really good question. As far as I know, the door-to-door scams aren't as big and large as they used to be, because right now you have computers, you have the internet, and you've got a faceless crime where you've got people all over the world and even in your own backyard that can try to scam you. You know, one of the biggest ones, investment frauds, which we're going to talk about soon, and romance scams. Romance scams are really, really tough because they're emotional. They're about being loved. It's an affair of the heart. And everybody wants to be loved and everybody wants to find their person. So when you fall in love with somebody that you think is your person, but it's actually not even anyone close. It could be a male or a female. It could be somebody in their 80s, somebody that's in their 20s, someone who's stolen somebody else's identity, somebody else's photo, and presenting themselves as your new love and trying to scam you for a lot of different items or money or cell phones or anything like that.
That's a great point. I think that there's so many scams beyond just door-to-door scams, especially because a lot of provinces banned door-to-door sales in 2018, including in particular for specific items. Dennis, how has this scam artistry evolved following the ban of door-to-door sales?
Yeah, great question, Christine. So when Ontario and other provinces banned the selling of HVAC equipment door to door in 2018, you would think it would have slowed this scam down, but it really didn't. Because what these companies did is they just switched to selling equipment which wasn't on the list of banned equipment. So the government said you can't sell furnaces, hot water heaters, water softeners, air conditioners door to door. So they stopped selling those things and started selling equipment that wasn't banned, like electrical optimizers or electrical surge protectors. And they're still going and putting liens on people's property to secure their interest in this rented equipment.
So, John, based on current trends that we've talked about, one of the biggest scams this year that's emerging is online investment scams. So what is an online investment scam, and what does a typical successful online investment scam look like?
Okay, I'll try to make this concise, which is one of my huge challenges in life. So an investment scam in a nutshell employs false or deceptive investment opportunities that will often attempt to mirror or impersonate legitimate investment opportunities. And they obviously take place online. So typical hallmarks of those particular scams include certain aspects, certain elements, but they're not always there. The problem with these scams, they're constantly changing. But certain hallmarks that you'll see will, number one, unrealistic returns. I've personally seen on previous investigations where fraudsters have promised returns of 10 to 25% per month, which I'd like to find that, but it doesn't exist. The fraudsters will utilize a combination of emails, text messages, classified ads online, postings or messages through social media to engage the victims. Fraudsters will often, but not always, try to evoke an element of secrecy or a non-disclosure agreement, but not always. They'll also try to utilize a sense of urgency, but again, not always. With certain frauds, with certain types of investment scams, the need for an urgency will resonate to that particular audience. But the more sophisticated scammers, there is such a thing, the more sophisticated scammers going after the big fish realize that they have to play the long game, and they'll actually be incredibly patient. As soon as they know that they have somebody who's interested, they'll quite patiently listen to every request and answer to every concern that particular investor might have.
So when we come back from this commercial break, Liz, I want to hear your take on investment scams, including the potential for these Bitcoin scams that we've been seeing online as well. We will be right back. Elizabeth, I wanted your take on investment scams, including what seems to be a rise in Bitcoin scams. Bitcoin's hugely popular and can be very lucrative, so it seems ripe for opportunity for scams. What are your thoughts on those two types of scams?
I think they're very similar. They're almost the same. It's a scam, it's an investment scam. But one of the key things that I've seen, especially during COVID, is that you've got the scammers and the fraudsters that are stealing legitimate investment firms' logos, creating their own website. Now, the key here is when they're creating this website, there's a lot of typos and spelling and grammar mistakes within it. But as John had mentioned earlier, yes, they want you to invest your money and they are guaranteeing you 15% daily return or whatever it is. And it's difficult right now because we are in a low interest rate environment. But the key is our industry cannot guarantee returns. So if you see a guarantee, you know it's a fraud. If you see the typos, you know it's a fraud. The other thing that they're doing is asking you to pay and invest with your credit card or PayPal. Well, that's not an investment. That's just you going into debt. So our investment firms do not use cash. You can either transfer the money in through an electronic fund transfer, you wire it, or you write a check the old-fashioned way. And as John said, like you have to do your due diligence and you have to do your research. If it sounds like it's too good to be true, it really is.
John, I want to ask you about what a typical victim of an investment scam might look like. Is it, Dennis had said that with his scams that he's working on, dealing with and resolving for clients, the clientele tends to be older and seniors. What are you seeing with respect to online investment scams?
With online investment scams, to put it in a sentence, I think that in the world of scams, investment scams are the great equalizer. I'll usually say there's 4 different groups of potential victims for scams. It's the elderly, newcomers, intellectually challenged, and everybody else. And specific to investment scams, it really encompasses the potential of everybody else. I've personally have been involved in investigations that has either identified these people or I've heard of people who have fallen for investment scams who were cops, criminals. That might surprise you, but criminals fall for scams too. Investment bankers, entrepreneurs, and even bankers.
Wow, I mean, it's not typically what you might expect. So Liz, if someone has given their money away to a fraudster, how likely are they to get it back and what kind of recourse might they have?
Well, see, that's a really good question, Christine, because everybody talks about scammers and fraudsters, but nobody knows what to do if they become a victim. So if you do become a victim of fraud, do not be ashamed. Do not stay silent. contact your bank or whatever your investment institution is and tell them what has happened. And maybe, just maybe, they may be able to stop the transfer. Then call your local police department. Then contact the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, Canadian Anti-Fraud Center with an re.ca. They have so many tips on there to let you know what different scams they've got. And then you know what? Tell your friend. Tell somebody, because you may just avoid them and protect them from being a victim of fraud. And beware, because these fraudsters will come back again. I have 4 quick tips, 4 signs of investment fraud. Number 1, you are promised high returns with little or no risk. There's no such thing. Number 2, you get a hot tip, right, from an insider. Number 3, you feel pressured to buy. Investing is no pressure. You need to understand it. And number 4, the individual is not registered to sell investments. Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, IROC.ca, they will let you know who's registered, who isn't. Canadian Securities Administrators, and then the Ontario Securities Commission.ca, OSC.ca.
Liz, this is all amazing advice. I want to thank all 3 of you for coming on today. We've heard today about the new and increasingly sophisticated ways that fraudsters and scammers are separating victims from their money, and about the financial and emotional damage these scams can cause. We've also heard about how to spot scams and what you can do if you believe you've been scammed. It can be challenging for victims to recover their money once they've been defrauded, but it's important not to be ashamed of being a victim. Go to the police, contact the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, and remember, there is no shame in what happened. The person who should be ashamed is the fraudster who takes advantage of people's good intentions. That's it for today's episode. I'm Christine Van Gyn, and remember, a freer Canada starts with you.